We have with us today Cardinal Keith O'Brien, who's the leader of the Scottish Catholic Church, and he's worked very hard in recent years to ensure that opposition to Trident should be seen as a major Christian concern, and we're very pleased that he's with us today.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation to be here, first of all, with each and every one of you, and with those others who will be speaking, addressing you today. I'm delighted to be here with Alan and Bruce. Alan in his Cardinal's red anorak, and Bruce with his tartan scarf and his beautiful blue folder. The three of us have appeared on a number of platforms before together. They fondly speak of us as the three Ronnies. And we speak, I think, with a common purpose, with a common goal, and I think you understand what that goal is. As we enter Holy Week, as we think about the great feast of Easter, as Christians together, we think of that great message of Jesus Christ at that time in his life before his death. Peace I leave with you. And I think it's because of that hungering for peace in the hearts of each and every one of us that we have gathered here now this afternoon. A longing for peace for ourselves and a longing for peace throughout the world, especially where at this present time there is so much war and so much unrest. I've been speaking of the teaching of the Catholic Church for many, many years now, particularly on this issue. And I know at times I'm not being listened to, perhaps not even being listened to by members of my own flock. But that doesn't matter. I've got a message, and I'm going to go on repeating that message as long as I possibly can. Quite simply because I think as a church person I do stand and represent Jesus Christ in handing on that same teaching of Jesus. So I greet you this afternoon with that Christian message, peace be with you. And I'm happy to be able to repeat that message here at the gates of Faslane, at the centre of really the nuclear industry, we might say. And knowing that I speak not just on my own behalf, but I speak on behalf of Pope Benedict XVI himself, my boss. And it was shortly after his election as Pope that Benedict summed up much of what we all believe in his first message for the World Day of Peace as far back as 2006, shortly after his own election as Pope. He was speaking out really to governments like our own, to the British government, and those other governments who mistakenly believe that nuclear weapons have a place in civilized society. His message was very strong, his message was very, very pointed, and I quote his exact words. He said, "The point of view that nuclear weapons have any place in a civilized society is not only baneful, but also completely fallacious. In a nuclear war," he said, "there would be no victors, only victims. The truth of peace requires that all agree to change their course by clear and firm decisions and strive for a progressive and concerted nuclear disarmament." Words from Benedict, if you think nuclear weapons have any place in a civil society, that view is not only painful, but completely fallacious. And I think with those words, we ourselves all strongly agree. And at that time, he was speaking not just of nuclear weapons. I know that's the heart of our gathering today, but thinking also, speaking also of all weapons, the increase in the weapons industry at this present time, the entire trade in weapons. And I think that's also a teaching we lose sight of at our peril. We realise not just the dangers, the threats from nuclear weapons, but each and every form of weaponry in our world at this present time. Weapons production, from the smallest handgun to rocket launchers and fighter aircraft, is big business, a massive industry, and in that industry we and our countries are involved more and more at this present time, with Britain having a leading role. Again, to quote Benedict, how can there ever be a future of peace when investments are still made in the production of arms and in research aimed at developing new ones? The growth of that industry, I say, is terrifying and frightening. And one of my great privileges as a bishop and as a cardinal is to have travelled to many other countries in the world on behalf of our aid funds, whether it is from the north of Africa to the south, in Asia, in other parts of the world, and realising the harm which is being done, the harm which is being created throughout the world through arms. And you see it night by night, day by day on our television screens. Wherever there's a war, wherever there's unrest, solve it by killing one another. My first visit abroad with our aid agency, it was to Rwanda. And you know something of the horrors of the genocide which took place there. I've been to Sudan, to Darfur, described when I was first there as the world's worst humanitarian disaster, and still it goes on being described as that, the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Wherever there are human beings, sadly, there's not just love and kindness and peace, there is war and there are weapons. And so often they come from so-called civilized countries like ours, increasing our income through the death of others, through the use of weapons of war. Indeed, we must have so much on our consciences if we are not doing more about it ourselves, if we're not shouting out and reassuring one another, but if we're not shouting out so that our voices reach the government in this country of Scotland and the government in Westminster as well, which has so much responsibility for what is going on. Yes, the poorest peoples in the world pay the highest price for an arms trade that brings misery to them and fortunes to the companies which develop that weaponry. Yes, as well as thinking about nuclear weapons and nuclear war, we must also have in our mind each and every weapon which travels from our country to bring disaster in some sort of a scale to other countries in the world. I would speak on behalf of my brother bishops in Scotland as well, because together as a body we've often echoed the peace demands of our church. And I repeat once more, here at the gates of Faslane, and there's no better place to say these words, it is not courageous of Britain to have these dreadful weapons of mass destruction. Rather, it is shameful of Britain to possess these weapons here in our country of Scotland. And if our country does wish to be courageous, it's not to have these weapons, it would be to unilaterally give up this nuclear deterrent, giving the witness and the impetus for other nations in the world to do so. If Britain wants to give a lead in any way, surely that would be a very clear sign of great leadership, of great power in giving up nuclear weapons so that others will follow. We know that Trident is fast becoming obsolete, and we do have the chance now, at this moment, to give up that obsolete source of power and killing. Give it up now and give a lead to others in the world. We do have, our country does have, that chance to be the peacemakers following in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. And perhaps we can pray today that our voices will indeed be heard far from here in those centres of power, and that we will consider what candidates for election very, very soon, what they say about these issues which are of great concern to us and to Christians, as far as I'm aware, of each and every denomination in our country of Scotland. May indeed that peace of Christ be with you, and thank you for being here with us today.